Hey there friends, and welcome to September's Moroccan inspired journal. So let's just dive right in. As you can see, I've actually created a stencil for this theme. I actually created this stencil because I was working on a furniture project for home, and I wanted a Moroccan inspired, kind of like a reloved repurposed kind of look on a beautiful old vintage timber bookcase I found. I'd seen something I kind of liked in a store and did not want to pay the hefty price tag, and I really wanted something that was unique and preferably something that was really quite solid, which is really difficult to find in retail stores here in Australia. They're normally quite a lot of kind of craft woods and things like that, but getting off track. So I created this stencil out of just finding a pattern that I was happy with on the internet. I copied it into a Word document and then just sized it to the scale I wanted, cut it out with a craft knife and just a cardboard pad. And here you see the stencil before you. I really love doing the piece of furniture so much, and it was really well received on my Insta page by my friends over there. So I thought, you know what, it would make an amazing tutorial and an even better theme for this month's journal. So this is what you're seeing before you. This is my cover page. I just wanted to go for something that was quite textural and just something that's really quite basic in the shape, and then let the paint and the color tell the story. I'm actually using Winsor Newton professional acrylic paints, which is something a little bit different that you don't always see me do. But they are some fabulous paints, and I actually use these for the furniture piece as well, so they've stood up really, really well on that piece of furniture as well. I will list all the names of the colours below, but I have, just for an FYI, I have only used 5 colours. So again, it's trying to keep that colour palette quite simple, not making it complicated, not making it expensive. And once again, I'm actually working on a favourite watercolour notepad by Mont. So it's got quite a thick GSM, quite a thick weight, and has an easy tear off perforated edge at the top, which I love because then I don't tear and ruin my artwork accidentally. So you'll actually just see me as I create this. I'm just going through and layering it slowly. You can see me mixing colors as I go, adding a little bit more in. I've come back to this one, just wanted to add a little bit more depth, a little bit more brown, a little bit more texture through that. It was just looking a little bit flat. So as you can see, this is really a simple project. You don't actually have to overcomplicate this. You could do this with kind of, if you had leftover house paint, if you had really just some cheap paints that you'd picked up, or anything that you had around the house that you've used for any craft project. The little bit of washi just helps it hold that stencil in place as I'm working. Again, just take care to make sure that if you're using a masking tape, don't choose something that is too tacky. Otherwise, when you're trying to move it around, you'll tear your paper. So as you can see, again, just mixing those colors, making it really quite simple, and layering that color up and just feeling my way. I didn't want to fill up the entire page, and I wanted to feel just like the piece of furniture, and I have linked that for you below. So a little FYI on that. I have linked the actual Insta image that I'd put up, and you can actually scroll through that and you'll see a before and after of that piece of furniture. So I didn't want to fill the entire page. I want it to look like it had been kind of worn out over time and rubbed back. So it's all just the fun of it. I'm not putting any words over this. I'm leaving it exactly as is, and I'm maybe even considering scanning this in and vectorizing it and turning it into a textile pattern, because I'm just really loving how it came out. So stay tuned for that. So if I go back and do that, I might come back and add a link below, obviously in the future, but I might come back and do that. So otherwise, if you are interested, you can always drop me a message below and I will get back to you. So you'll see me just doing this. I actually have made this stencil in 2 different sizes. So this was the large size I used on the piece of furniture, and then I actually make it in a smaller version because I wanted to use it in my color palette. So a heads up, you will notice this month I just had a lot going on and quite a lot of distraction in the studio this month with so many things on my list and bits and pieces I had to keep going back to. So I really felt my way this month in how I designed and created my journal setup. You'll notice that I go back and make changes as I've gone along. In particular, you'll notice that I did actually remove the tape on that cover, and then I actually did fill in the piece right to the bottom. I just felt that I didn't like the border. So I do the same with the page keeper. I go back and change some things on this one as well. So it really is exactly how I'm painting it, and I'm kind of thinking it through as I go. Well, the entire journal setup this month was exactly like that. Sometimes it feels more fluid, sometimes not so much. And that's the creative process for you. So I hope that you feel the same about yours. Sometimes you just don't like what you've created, or it doesn't come out exactly how you intended in your mind, or you change your mind, whatever that case may be. So I hope that that frees you up to realize that you can do exactly the same thing. So if you decide it's not your favorite, that's all good too. Go back and make a change if you feel the need. Otherwise, let it go. That's always good to do that as well. It's good not to dwell and overthink it. And it's not only that, sometimes you come back and actually love it the next day. So I've done that as well. So be free in how you create and be kind to yourself. So again, this is the smaller version of this stencil. I first intended to kind of do like 9 little patches, a bit like how I paint the watercolor patches. But you will notice that I do come back at the end, and I actually fill in the whole space. And I do actually also come back and change it. So this was always intended to be my color palette, but I was going to write Moroccan color palette, and then when I started doing it, luckily in pencil, I like to work in pencil first before I move straight into pen. And then I did decide that wasn't really happy with it, and I go back and I fill in all the gaps and add my ink and my color palette, etc. at the end. So I'm not sure about you, but I really just love this theme this month. I really love how it's kind of got that verdigris, that beautiful mustard or amber, the brown tones, the beige, that kind of sage olive musks. These colors are really in my home. So this is a bit of a peek behind the scenes of my life and how I dwell, I guess. But they also are really current in the current collection, textile collection I am creating. So I do, when I'm in this mindset, I do tend to surround myself very much with the color palette and the theme that I'm working on. It just helps me creatively. So it completely depends. You may have a different way, but that's how I work. So the colors in this new collection are very much the color palette that you see. And you can see me now going back over that word Moroccan and adding in the extra colors. So I'd love to know what you think. If you would have liked to have it less crowded, but to me, I just love it. It feels like it's a tiled wall in an old Moroccan city, or a bazaar. It just feels wonderful and makes me feel happy. And here's the final piece. As you can see, some of the shapes are more obvious than others. They're definitely patchy, and the colors just work so beautifully together. And this is me adding in my my color palette name for this one in my normal freehand script. This is how I tend to do a lot of my work. So it's very simple. I have done it in pencil first, so by all means, if you don't want to ruin what you've already done because you made a mistake, or someone walks in and interrupts you or bumps you or something like that, it's always a good idea to do it in pencil first, so that you can be sure of spatially how it's going to sit. You're not going to run out of space at the end of a page or make it too crowded, etc., etc. Look at those beautiful rich colours and how nicely they work together. And then we move on to the page keeper, which always has my month written on it, which means I don't have to add that to the cover page, which it does protect the artwork that I end up creating for that page. So if I do decide I want to use that as an illustration or as something else in my crazy creative life, then I definitely can do that. And I do love my little page keeper. It makes it very easy to find the months if I'm looking back or moving forward, etc. in my diary. This is again a simple black card, one of my favorites, my favorite white gel pen. And again, I actually just used that little stencil, the small stencil that I used in the color palette, and just held it in place and went around it with some pencil really quickly. And as you can see, I'm just freehanding this. I'm not getting too stressed about the lines. You will notice when it comes to the final that I decided to add a little paint. So you can still see a little bit of the white edges, but for me, I just felt like it needed that paint. And you'll notice that I go back and add it to all my pages this month because it just feels a bit too naked without it. So I've moved on here to my month at a glance. This is turning over the cover page. So this has just the beautiful shapes on the other side. This is my notes page. It sits off to the edge and you can see just the last couple of columns of my month at a glance. Again, I would add a little botanical because to me everything just feels like it needs to have a little leaf, like it's appearing out of the cracks of the tiles or the bricks as they may be. And I do go back and add some paint to this, so you will see that at the end. And I make sure that those leaves, if they're looking a bit lost, I go over them with the ink as well. Again, this is one of my favorite pigment liners. I'll link that for you below. And I do again do this in pencil before I ink. And those little boxes that you see are just a simple 3x3 centimeters. The top border that has the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, blah blah blah, that's just a 1 centimeter, so a 1x3 centimeters. Really quite simple. So if you're like me and you prefer to work in a journal that doesn't have grid marks, then I just love it because I always end up creating art pieces that I use later, and removing all those little grid dots will do my head in. So this frees me up from to use my creative energy how it best suits me. Again, if you're a fan of the grid lines, then by all means do what works for you. So as you can see, this is my favorite little ruler. I've had this for ages. I actually got gifted it in a set from something, I don't even remember when, but it's so good because I can see underneath it, so it means that I can be quite precise, although it has been a bit chopped up over the years, so those lines are a little bit wobbly in places, which for me, I love the perfect imperfection. As per usual, I like to run 1 month into the other, so you can see the final days of August showing there, which have come and gone. We are on the 1st of September today. So you'll see the last couple of days of August and then the month of September on this two-page spread. So we're going into the second page now. This is one of my favorite digital silk papers, so it's quite smooth and silky, whereas the other one's quite rustic. I do change my pigment liner here, so I go from a 0.3 to a 0.2. So again, that'll be linked below, but it's up to you. I just find that I like the finer liner on this paper. It does take a little bit longer for this page to dry, but once it's dry, it's beautiful, and it's wonderful to be used with Copic marker. So you'll notice I use the Copic on my weekly spreads, and that's always done on this digital silk paper. It's quite thick again, so you don't tend to get too much ghosting even when you're using Copics, which is great, unless you get a bit heavy with the layering of colour. Again, I add in a few of those little leaves. I don't add the paint to this side, but I do to the other, so you will see that at the end. Again, I'm following on exactly from the page before so that they run over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sunday I join together. I just find that that works for me. There you go, that's with a little bit of tiles added, very rustic and just delightful. And then I decided to add a quotes page this month, which is I haven't done for a bit, so it was fun. I found this lovely quote and it just spoke to me, as I always do. Added in a little bit of my sweet pigment liner as usual, and then I will colour this one at the end with just some of my pencils. So we got quite the mixed media this month. Acrylics, Copic markers, pigment liners, coloured pencils, you name it, they're all in this month. Okay, so there you can see my final quote. A holiday is an opportunity to journey within, which is just perfect. I love to travel overseas and haven't travelled overseas for so many years now with COVID. I cannot wait to get back to travelling. Okay, so moving on now, this is my final weekly page spread. So these will just be, I create these as I go. I very rarely create them all at once. Again, this is really simple. I used the little stencil I created for the colour palette, which is the mini version of the shape, and I've just added those through the centre. I'm going to add some Copic to that, and I'm just putting the days of the week in there. As you can see, I do 1 week to a dual page spread. Again, do what suits you. Your journal has to be personalised to suit you best, not to copy anyone else. So be original, be you. So I've just put those really simple little tiles in, and I'm just colouring that up with some of my favourite Copics. Again, I will actually add the colours and numbers, etc. for you below. Just making sure I'm using that fine tip, not the chiselled point at the other end, and just layering that colour through. I just love how these, the shapes and the way that they layer together, so just keeping that diagonal together so that it doesn't look messy. So this is quite a simple, again the colours work so nicely together, that beautiful musk, the tan, the sage, and I use that lovely yellow, or to signify the mustard, sorry, on the final one. Okay, so getting near the end of this lovely 20-odd minute journal setup this month, and I hope you've really enjoyed it. I hope that you've enjoyed making it your own. If you decide to do something similar or even use a different shape, that would be amazing. Again, always love to hear from you and what you think. If you create something similar, tag me. I would love to see what you've created. So I will add all the links, all the tools, all the supplies, all the secrets below. Ask any questions you like and I'll jump on those as soon as I can. And more than anything, thank you so much for supporting me and my little channel. And I hope to see you soon. Have a great month.